So this is an overview. We're going to talk about how the liver is where cholesterol leaves. It's where fat gets packaged. These molecules come out of the liver. They have certain tags on them, and they then give away a bunch of resources and come back to the liver. It's supposed to be a cycle. So we're going to go through that. So here's our beautiful liver. You'll notice it's smooth. There's no extra sugar on it. There's no fat. There's no lumps. It's a beautiful liver. Why is it beautiful? Because the insulin is normal. This is not a high insulin patient. So we're going to take our beautiful, shiny, perfect looking liver, and we're going to show you that when the exit out of the liver is a chylomicron. So this beautiful package, you can see all the blue water molecules around the outside, and there's so many red dots inside there because it's filled with triglycerides. Now remember, our patient's triglycerides were low. They were good, 60s, 50s. She gets A+ on her triglycerides. And why is that? Because in her chylomicrons, they left the liver with their duty. Their duty was to supply energy, specifically fat energy, to the cells, which keeps them healthy. It helps them repair from cracks or damages or even DNA or radiation damage, aging damage. It needs the fat to do that. So this chylomicron, we're going to pretend it's going to dump it off in a muscle cell. So this is my picture of a muscle cell. And here come those triglycerides. They leave the muscle cell and they go into, they leave the chylomicron and they go into the muscle cell, and the muscle says, oh, thank you. That's what I need. And then it'll take even some extra triglycerides and store it in case it needs it later, because sometimes that chylomicron doesn't come around as often. We have backup plans for when food isn't delivered as routinely as it's delivered in America and most of the world today. So as that chylomicron, as you study what it does, along the bottom there you can see that the triglycerides were 84%, the cholesterol was 8%, and the phospholipids were 7%. So there's just a repeat of showing you that those triglycerides leave the chylomicron into the muscle cell, and as they do that, the percentage of triglycerides got smaller. So now we call it a VLDL. Now you'll notice that the ribbon just changed on the outside of that. It now says ApoB100, but the triglycerides are down to 50%, and by definition, the cholesterol rose inside that little delivery unit, and so did the phospholipids. It didn't give much of that at all in most cases for muscle cells. It delivered the juiciest, the most coveted fat inside the body, which was triglycerides. So that VLDL emptied out those resources, went into the muscle cell, and said, oh, look, I even have a new tag. So as the VLDL, it does the same thing. It gets rid of triglycerides, saying, oh, I have a bunch of those. Half of my carrying unit is triglycerides. Let me give you some more. And this is super important for our ability to repair the body, to heal the brain. This fat delivery is the key component to longevity, to health, to repairing the body, and to your energy. How do you feel? You take triglycerides, and in the liver, they are made into ketones. So as you get rid of those triglycerides, though, we now resized that little ship, that little delivery unit. We now call it an intermediate density because you got rid of a bunch of triglycerides. And these have only 30% triglycerides, which means the cholesterol is a little higher because it's a percentage, right? And the phospholipids are a little higher because we're all taking percentage points here. As you look, what's the job of IDL? It goes out on its delivery route. It tries to find other places that maybe the chylomicron couldn't reach, or the VLDL was too big to reach, but now the IDL is a little smaller and it can reach in those other places, gives some more energy to those cells. We've got to keep them fueled. And now finally, here's our LDL cholesterol, the one where our patient has it over 300. Well, what is up with that? Well, in her LDL, she has 8% triglycerides. Why? Because she gave them to the cells and the cells used them. They didn't get stuck. They actually delivered them to the cells, and the cells burned them as energy in the mitochondria. Her cells felt better. Her immune system was stronger. Her brain was healing because she got rid of the triglycerides. She dumped them off where they belonged. And of course, when you look carefully inside her LDL cholesterol, it's 50% cholesterol. It's those blue water molecules with the yellow tags, phospholipids on the outside, that's 20%. Only 8% are the triglycerides. All right, let's just kind of recap here. This is super important. If you don't get this, the next part's not going to make any sense. The LDL, it resolves, it goes back, it recycles back into the liver. Once it goes, your emptying agent went out into the world of the body saying, who needs energy? Who needs repair? The chylomicron delivered triglycerides, the VLDL delivered triglycerides, the IDL delivered triglycerides. The LDL doesn't have any triglycerides left. Oh, it needs to go back to the liver and be refilled back into a chylomicron. So its job is to recycle. So how much of it is in each drop of blood depends on, well, how much is being returned back into the liver. So let's do that quick. Here comes that chylomicron. This is again our healthy patient. The chylomicron gave off a bunch of triglycerides. There they went into the muscle cell. Then it became a VLDL, and off went some triglycerides. Enough triglycerides that it's now an IDL. The IDL has higher cholesterol, higher phospholipids, less triglycerides, but watch, its job is to give triglycerides away to the body, to the brain, to the body, to the heart. And now you have your LDL. And he's done. He doesn't have any more to deliver. He needs to recycle. So in healthy people, maybe it delivers a little bit. It can give off a few triglycerides there. But its main job is to recycle back into the liver. And when it does that, you live happily ever after. All right, so how do you know if you're recycling your cholesterol or not? How does our patient know? So let's compare what this looks like when it's the opposite. And by opposite, I mean it's high insulin. That their insulin state is on overdrive. Sometimes, looking at some of the studies, it can be 15, 20 times higher insulin than a healthy patient. What we're going to watch is, look what happens to that liver over that time of insulin, is that it becomes, you can see it becomes gnarly looking. Now, it almost looks cancerous, but that's kind of what, when you go to autopsy and you look at fatty livers, or you look at livers that they bathe in insulin, they have this kind of gnarly, go Google autopsy of fatty liver and look at the picture of a liver that is been bathed in insulin for too long. It's not pretty, it's not shiny, it's gnarly. So here we are, back to our story. We still are going to have our liver do its job. It's going to package the fat into a molecule that is water soluble and can run around the body and try to deliver the resource that the cells want, which is triglycerides, except it's fighting against insulin. So here comes our chylomicron, our big fluffy guy. Remember, he's got the triglycerides that are at 80% or 84%, the cholesterol's at 8%, the phospholipids are at 7%, and it does this beautiful job of delivering the triglycerides. But what we tried to show on this slide is that, do you notice that these are just moving slower? The ability for the cell to share its triglyceride with those cells, it is blunted by high insulin. Insulin is high because glucose is present, right? If glucose is around, you don't get to use these fat. You got to take care of the glucose first, or you'll get a glucose coma and die. So it's trying to protect you. Insulin's trying to be the good guy here. But in the setting of high insulin, it cannot offload those triglycerides. They go slow. So yep, you have chylomicrons. And as that insulin gets higher and higher, it builds up those triglycerides in the liver. Like, they're not getting empty as much. They're turning into a fatty liver. As you look, this is our VLDL, so we know that it's got only about half triglycerides, 20% cholesterol, about 20% phospholipids. And its job is, once again, to deliver the triglycerides. But notice, they're just moving super slow. Like, that ability for the cell to offload that energy into the cells that want it is blocked with high insulin. And it is every hour of every day that the insulin is high. So as you move on, you do get some IDLs. The IDL will eventually, it'll circle around, it'll circle around, it'll circle around. It's only got 30% triglycerides, but it's going to do its duty. It's going to stay in circulation until it offloads its triglycerides. And you can see these are kind of the turtle version of triglycerides. They're very slow. They're getting where they need to go, but boy, it's slow. And just take a notice at how many triglycerides have built up in that liver by now. We are not cycling that cholesterol very quickly. It's slow. So here's our cute little LDL. It's supposed to be this awful molecule, but it only has 8% triglycerides. So finally, everybody finally got the cholesterol's delivered to where they needed to. Take a look at that liver now. It's totally packed with triglycerides. That's what a fatty liver looks like. And then you say, well, what happens next? Because in a healthy person, that LDL cholesterol is supposed to cycle back into the liver and get filled back up with triglycerides and then go circulating again. And you can see that liver is jam-packed full of triglycerides. Those LDL want to go in there. They want to be restored to that fluffy version that filled with that good energy to repair the body. But insulin blocks that. As those LDL keep building up, they can't get in. The door is closed. They cannot get into that cholesterol and recycle. And the higher the insulin gets, the longer they circulate in the body, those cholesterol units become oxidized. That sounds like good, like it becomes oxygenated, right? No, this is not good. When LDL cholesterol gets oxidized, it essentially turns that ApoB100 LDL cholesterol into a bullet. And that is the kind of cholesterol that is absolutely deadly. I would not want an LDL cholesterol of 300 in my patient who has a triglyceride in the 300s. The amount of triglycerides present are going to teach me, oh, how well is she recycling? How well are they dropping off the fuel and burning it through those cells? You can look at the lab results for most places, and they want those triglycerides to be less than 150. Personally, I want all my patients under 100. I love it when it's less than 75 because it gives me more confidence to say, when I'm looking at a problem and I'm trying to, like without a biopsy, I'm trying to look inside their liver, I'm trying to look inside their body, and I can spend more money than you're worth on lab tests and scanning and biopsying and trying to find a way to get your system to understand, are you the one that's going to die of that heart attack? Is your LDL cholesterol dangerous? And what I'm really looking for is, do they have a bunch of extra glucose hanging out in their blood system and in their liver? And again, you can check that with your own, you can check morning fasting blood sugars. And if it's high, guess what? Your liver is screaming at you to say, hey, slow down. I got to get rid of this sugar so that I can actually use the fat. The next thing that happens after the sugars are a little bit high is it gets stored into those glycogen balls. Those little white circles are a bunch of glucose all tied into one. It's just a more efficient way to store the glucose. And by golly, after the glycogen storage taps out, you're going to see the inflammation of triglycerides pummeling, just pelleting that liver. And what happens next? You're going to see the body try to get rid of triglycerides through the chylomicron. And it's going to do it, but it's going to take a long time. It's going to take forever compared to what happens in a healthy person. Then you're going to see that we got rid of enough triglycerides, we changed the tag, we call it VLDL, but it's still the same little molecule running around the body trying to find a place to give this healthy, restoring, fatty energy so that the body has good power and has the resources to repair from injury. But with high insulin, you cannot do that. So the next thing that we look at is, after we give a bunch of those triglycerides away, we call it, that's an IDL. And finally, they give enough triglycerides away, we call it an LDL. And what's supposed to happen next is it's supposed to go back to the liver, but it just circulates in your blood longer and longer and longer and longer and longer. And it's got this tag on the outside called ApoB100. And especially if it's oxidized, that means it's been there a while. You do not want oxidized ApoB100. It's like a rusty bullet and it's about to explode. That's the imagery I want you to think about when your cholesterol cannot recycle.
Please subscribe to my channel. And don't forget to click the notification bell so you don't miss out on any new videos. Stay tuned.